Joined now by Jason Stahl, the founder, director, creator of the College Football Players Association, Jason, and an IU graduate, no less.
That's correct. That is correct.
How are you doing, man? Thanks a lot for coming on. Appreciate you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
You bet. Dustin Schutte from College Saturday Tradition with me as well. Big news yesterday with the memo from the General Counsel of the National Labor Relations Board. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but in essence now, they're saying that college athletes are employees.
Yeah, I mean, so is guidance, right? I mean, this is great news, right? She's basically suggesting, look, for the purposes of the National Labor Relations Board, she is, if any cases come her way, right? If any sort of adjudication comes her way where she needs to think about a case that involves college athletes and whether they want to be classified as employees, whether they want to unionize, et cetera, that is her guidance, that she will then assume these are employees that we're dealing with and not, quote unquote, student athletes. Okay. This is a big deal. Don't get me wrong. Right. But it does not have the force of law. Okay. This is someone who's in charge of who is sort of setting her opinion, how she and the board will take on such cases should they get to the Washington level. Right. Because there's several local labor relations boards as well, right? And so she is saying this is what happens at the national level. This is my guidance. It's great news, but from my perspective, we still got a very, very long road ahead of us, right? In terms of thinking about how do we get from point, despite this great news from this memo, there's still a long road ahead to get from point A to point B, where you've got a mass of college athletes, whether it's on a football team, let's say, that's obviously what we're most concerned with, or on a men's basketball team, who get classified as employees and then take that next step to unionize, right? This is great news. But, when you watch, from my perspective, I'll be writing about this for tomorrow, but from my perspective, when I see kind of Twitter blow up yesterday among sort of athletics reform people that I'm kind of networked in with, right? My inclination is always to say, well, let's slow down here a little bit, right? Let's make sure that we sort of properly situate what happens and properly kind of situate for college athletes the long road that is still ahead of us here, despite the good news of this memo.
And Jason, one of the things I kind of want to go back to, and maybe this is going in a different direction. I'm not nearly as smart and as intelligent as you are. So my question is, Minnesota running back Muhammad Ibrahim at Big Ten Media Days was asked, is a 15 or 16 game season for a college football player too much if they expand this playoff and go to 12 teams and you eventually get to basically an NFL schedule? And his response stuck out to me. He said, for amateurs, yes, but maybe if you start paying us, no. So it was an interesting response that he gave, and I think some people at Buckeye Scoop asked the question, and we're getting different responses from different players. But my question to you is, I mean, I know that you said there's a long way to go. Do you see that there's getting to the point where right now we have the NIL where the schools aren't paying the student athletes? They're getting it from endorsement deals. They're getting it from autograph sessions and these different opportunities and advertisement. Do you see us getting to a point, or is the ball starting to roll towards the direction of the schools actually having to compensate student athletes directly?
Boy, it's a great kind of couple questions there, Dustin. I had not seen that quote by Mo. So let's tackle these kind of separately here. Okay. So I think that we're talking about college football expansion. This is where I try to make the difference because, look, we're a players association here. Okay. At some point, if individual football teams or entire conferences or whatever the case may be, at the football level, want to unionize, if the players make the decision that they want to unionize, we will be ready to go. Okay. I mean, we'll have the funds, we'll have the support structure in place to make that a reality if that is what members want. Okay. So as we get down the road, if players are very much suggesting, if membership is very much suggesting that that's what they want to try to do, that they want to move in the route of employee classification, pay for play, and unionization, we're going to be all in for that, right? But Mo's answer to that question really gets to the heart of a players association can do so much more before we get to those points, right? Mm-hmm. College football playoff expansion is such a key issue where I think we can really show here, and I think we will show soon, that we can make an entrance into, we can be the collective voice of college football players nationwide before we get to those things like employee classification, unionization, collective bargaining, right? Mm-hmm. We can demand, the players, our members can demand that they be included in these conversations, because Muhammad is exactly right that it is going to be very debatable, right? And I think he's right. I think if you look nationwide, if you look, guys I've talked to, I mean, the idea that we're going to push more games onto these quote unquote student athletes, right? When they're in the midst of finals, I was a teacher of these guys for, a decade, right? The demands on their lives to just say, oh yeah, we're just going to go ahead and do this without even consulting them, right? Well, the consultation can happen. The collective voice of the players involved in the conversation, that can happen before we even get to these bigger issues of pay for play and so forth. And I could see players using that collective voice coming down exactly where Mo came down, which is to say, no, not until we're employees, not until pay for play do we do something like this, right? Not until we get some sort of share of these billions that you're going to make from expanding the playoffs, right? But yeah, I think this is why I say there's this long lead up here where we can show the power of a players association before we even get to those things.
Jay, why you? Why? How did you decide and want to pick up this torch and run with it and do what all is needed to be done and all of that? Where did that impetus come from to do that?
Yeah, it's a fair question, Jim, because I think that, how I got involved in this, if you had told me 10 years that I'd be here talking with you about this, 10 years later, I would not have believed you, right? 10 years ago. And, I was a professor at the University of Minnesota, right? I'm trained as a historian. I am interested in the history of labor and work. This is very much what I've studied. I've been a union activist in my life. I've been a political activist and organizer in my life. So I think I have the life experience that kind of sort of points to something like this, right? But like 15 years ago, I didn't really watch college football games, to be totally honest with you. It just wasn't in my wheelhouse. All right. So for me, this really changed behind the scenes. The decade from 2010 to 2020, I had thousands of students. Of those thousands of students, I had hundreds of student athletes, right? Because of my situation at the University of Minnesota. Of those, I probably had 60 to 70 football players. And I just honestly took an interest in their lives. You see their lives behind the scenes, man. You get the reality of what this is like. It's not just about, being out there on Saturday and big men on campus and whatever else. The struggles that these guys go through to balance, the demands on their time and on their lives are just intense. And about 2015, I talked with enough guys where I was like, I want to make this my second book. I want to write about the realities of the lives of college football players, right, that people don't know about. And I want to try to reform things if I can, because, for instance, like for me, I really entered into this thinking, my big focus in 2015 was they weren't getting the education that they were promised. Like the only payment some of these guys get is that scholarship, right? And I'm not going to say like it is like, I went into debt to go through my college education, and lots of people I know go into debt. It is a payment of sorts. All right. I really do believe that. Yet the payment, quote unquote, had become very, let's put not real. Like in terms of they're not getting what they were promised in terms of the type of education that I got as an undergrad, right? Where I really got to kind of dig in and get a real value for my education. So I really became energized about the kind of reforming the academic side of things. All right.
Well, we've got a comment that Senator Burr from North Carolina introduces a bill to make scholarship funds taxable if they make too much from NIL money. Well, what's too much?
I know, what's too much. I mean, this is such a terrible idea on its face. I mean, I'm very much in support of NIL. I mean, but we see some of the data coming back on NIL, and it's kind of what you sort of expect going in. There's a lot of big guys who are seeming to rake in a decent amount of NIL bucks, and then there's a lot of scraps on down the line, right? Because 98.4% of college football players don't go on to the NFL, right? So we know that 1.6% that does go on to the NFL, that those are the guys that are going to be getting the most, NIL dollars, right? So, we're going to penalize them. Oh, great here. They make too much money. All right. So we're kind of getting a little bit sidetracked here, but I think that why me? I mean, I really gravitated around 2017 to health and safety concerns. Okay. So for me, what I was seeing behind the scenes at Minnesota is extreme health and safety concerns. I've written a lot about this. People can find me and sort of dig into the kind of stuff I've been seeing and reporting as a professor, trying to raise concerns about health and safety issues. And so for the past 5 years, that's really been where my focus is. And I've been working with lots of players and lots of people where what we're saying here, this is back to Dustin's question earlier, is there so much we can do on the health and safety and welfare front before we get to pay for play? I mean, my God, do people know that from 2000 to 2016, 33 college football players died playing the game? Died. Okay? I mean, 32 of those died in practice. All right? That's the reality of football. And I like football and I like watching football, but man, we can do football better. We can make sure that guys aren't dying in practice, right? I mean, so for me, it's that's why me, Jim. And I think I've, assembled a team and have drawn players into this new organization where we're going to come out here in the fall in a big way and show people that we can make change before we even get to that, the idea of employee classification, unionization, and so forth.